Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. My name is Cassandra, and I'm so happy that you could join us for Heart Gallery's monthly webinar, Responding to Difficult Questions in Adoption Conversations. We are so thankful that you could join us today. Today, we're very excited to have Jody Chandler, Program Manager, and Vevin Barrett, Adoption Case Manager from DePelchin Children's Center. Jody is a licensed clinical social worker supervisor and oversees clinical counseling and case management programs dedicated to supporting children and family. Vevin works closely with CPS to match children available for adoption and provides education, guidance, and support to adoptive parents going through the adoption process. After the presentation, we'll have some time for Q&A, and if y'all have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat as I'll be monitoring, or you can also wait till the end to ask them directly. I'll also be following up with everyone after the training through email. But for now, please help me welcome Jody and Vevin. Thank you all for being here today.
Hey, thank you, Cassandra. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you guys for taking some time out of your day to join us for our conversation today. As Cassandra said, my name is Jody Chandler. I have been working with DePelchin Children's Center for what will be 16 years this year. Most of my career has focused on either providing behavioral therapy services to youth and their families or managing behavioral therapy programs here at DePelchin. In the past, maybe 5 years or so, that has expanded into working with our kinship caregivers, particularly focusing on informal kinship placements. So families that are not involved with CPS, kids are not in conservatorship, but trying to find support for those caregivers as they try and provide, safe spaces for our youth. And then in the more recent history is moving into the foster care and adoption side of services, which is part of what brings me into this conversation today. And Bevin?
And I'm Vevin Barrett, and I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I have been at DePelchin Children's Center for about 19 years, working in foster care, adoption, and also post-adoption. And I currently serve as an adoption case manager, working with adoptive families. Go ahead, Jody.
Oh, yeah, no worries. So we just want to say, in case anybody is not familiar with DePelchin Children's Center, that DePelchin has been serving youth and families in the Houston area since 1892. So we have quite an extensive history out in this part of town. Our programs and services have changed really drastically since when DePelchin was created, but our commitment to serving youth and families has really stayed the same throughout all of those transitions. And we also provide services currently in and around the Austin, Lubbock, and San Antonio areas. And so you guys might be familiar with our presence in some of those areas around Texas.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be talking about responding to difficult questions in adoption conversations. These discussions can be emotional and complex. As the adults in children's lives, we play a critical role in shaping the tone of these conversations, creating a space that feels open, supportive, and safe as children navigate their experiences and develop their identities. We hope that children can develop a positive identity when it comes to their adoption story. We won't be able to cover every possible question, but our goal today is to give you a framework, something you can rely on to guide a wide range of conversations. So, why these conversations matter? Adoption conversations today exist in a very different space than they did historically. There was a time when children were often never told they were adopted, or adoption was framed with secrecy, shame, or loss. Often individuals did not find out they were adopted until their parents had passed away and they were going through old documents where they found their adoption paperwork. This was understandably confusing and upsetting for the adult adoptees to find out this way and likely caused further grief and loss of trust. Framing adoption and secrecy and shame limited open dialogue and shaped how children understood their identity as an adopted individual, and sometimes this was in a negative light. Over time, perspectives have shifted towards compassion for children, biological families, and adoptive families alike. Today, we're continuing to move towards openness and honesty. While there's always room for growth, we now recognize that conversations about adoption should be ongoing, transparent, and supportive. So how can we help our children develop a positive identity about their adoption story? We can start with open conversations. Open conversations build trust, and trust grows through honesty. When children learn information later or feel it has been hidden, they can feel hurt or betrayed. They may even wonder what else their adoptive parents have not told them. Ongoing conversations help prevent that. Kids need to feel safe coming to their parents for questions. Adoption can become part of the natural story. Ideally, children don't remember a single big reveal conversation about being adopted. It's just something they've always known and understood in age-appropriate ways. Children can take pride in their adoption story. When adoption is framed positively, kids can feel confident, even proud. There are wonderful examples of children sharing their story and others responding with curiosity or admiration. Many years ago, I had an adoptive family whose daughter had a friend over to play, and she had obviously talked to her friend about her adoption story in such a positive manner that when the friend was getting ready to leave that day, she came into the kitchen where the adoptive mom was and eagerly asked, "Do you think I could be adopted too?" And the adoptive mom said she knew in that moment that she had done a good job of talking to her daughter about her adoption story and helping her develop a positive feelings and identity about the topic. I loved hearing that story. So, some other things to consider about adoption questions and conversations include silence doesn't mean absence of questions. So even if children aren't asking, they might be wondering. If we don't lead these conversations, they might seek answers elsewhere. It's important to open the door early to answering questions about their adoption story so that they don't seek out answers online, potentially searching on the internet from a friend's house. You can simply say that if you ever have questions about your adoption story or birth family, please come to me. I'm happy to answer questions as best as I can. Sometimes adoptive children may worry that they'll hurt your feelings by asking questions about their birth family, or they might pick up on the fact that you seem uncomfortable with the topic and just avoid asking. But in the age of social media and being able to find just about anybody online, it's important that we open that door and lead the conversation. Adoption conversations should be ongoing conversations throughout a child's life, not a one-time event. This helps normalize the child's experience, provide ongoing support, and provide windows of opportunity for the child to ask questions or talk about how they're feeling about the topic. And these feelings can change over time quite a bit. So language empowers understanding. We all know that. The words and support children have, the more words and support children have, the better equipped they are to make sense of their experience and tell their story. So how can you prepare for these conversations? Prepare yourself first. So practice what you want to say, even in the mirror. Children are highly attuned to tone and body language. So if your tone or body language conveys a sense of hesitancy or you're conveying a sense of dread about the topic, that can set a negative or anxious tone. A stiff body frame, like you're treading into scary territory, can cause children to feel like you're about to drop a bomb. So sitting in front of the mirror and just saying it a few times yourself is a great way to just look and make sure you have a nice, relaxed body frame, a positive tone, and your children will often mirror this. You might be worried about the type of questions children are going to ask during a conversation like this, and maybe worry about not having appropriate answers. So it's okay to say phrases like, "That's a really important question. I want to give you a good answer. Can we come back to it after I have some time to think?" Or, "That's a great question, and I don't have the answer to that question, but I can work on getting an answer for you." Those are always good defaults to fall back on. So how can we go about making these conversations on adoption more natural and not a one-time event? We can try to build it into daily life. So, one easy way to do that is using your child's life book from foster care. So, many children should have some sort of photo life book from their time in foster care developed by previous foster parents. If not, you can help the child develop this when they are placed in your home. You can look through the photos together and talk about where the child lived and where they are now. If you were their only placement in foster care, you can show photos from the day they joined your home, photos of them aging, and their adoption finalization day in court. You can continue to document the child's story from early beginnings to milestones in your home. This creates natural opportunities to revisit the child's story over time as you add photos and information to the life book. It grows with the child. So you can also use children's books about adoption. Children's stories are a great way to start the conversation and guide the conversation using age-appropriate language. More about this on the next slide, though. You can also use TV shows and movies. There are many movies and television shows that cover the top of adoption, many famous examples. Sometimes we don't even catch it as we're watching them, but the more you think about it, you'll see how many times adoption is built into certain movies and shows. You can watch these shows together and then ask your child open-ended questions during the commercial break or getting a snack, such as, what do you think about her adoption story? Or how do you think that character feels? So, as we think about selecting books or a TV show or movie, just some things to think about there. So, children's books can be a great way to start the conversation about a child's adoption story. Especially for a family that may have never spoken about a child's adoption or haven't spoken about it in a while. These books and movies are a great way to introduce or reintroduce the conversation. But just a few things to consider. You'll want to read the book or watch the show or movie ahead of time. Be familiar with the message and wording and agree with the content. You'll want to choose age-appropriate books or shows with supportive messaging. By reading or watching the show first, you ensure that the book reflects the values that you want to reinforce about adoption and has the correct language regarding your child's type of adoption. For example, if you adopted domestically from foster care and the child was preschool age, you'll want to avoid the book that says, "We flew across the ocean to get you when you were a baby." Many books focused on international adoption in the past, but there are a lot of great ones out there now regarding domestic adoption from foster care as well. You'll also want to choose age-appropriate language. You can continue to purchase additional books on the topic as your child gets older. Let the books grow with your child's understanding. There are wonderful chapter books out there for older elementary and teenagers as well. If you're not sure where to start, we recommend choosing a book one developmental level below. The great thing about children's books are simple messages, and you can always build up if you need to. Same goes for TV shows and movies that are available to us.
Okay, perfect. I think in regards to selecting different books as well, I think we find that youth and even teens are really receptive to reading children's books, but tend to do best when you identify this is a children's book. We know that you can understand more than this. We know that you are above this level, but it just happens to be a really simple representation of the story. And then sometimes that initial aversion they have to leaning into reading this children's book or simple book gets negated a little bit, and they can just really appreciate the content of what we're trying to provide. Okay, so as we had kind of stated earlier, our goal today is really to kind of provide a framework that you can use when you're navigating difficult questions that you might be getting from youth. The steps really focus on planning and preparation. Our goal is really to be fully present whenever we're having conversations with youth and being able to be proactive instead of reactive in our responses. And so I will dive into each of these bullet points a little bit further here. So the first part here is really to prepare the moment. We want to set up the conversation really intentionally. And so, as Bevan had mentioned earlier, we've already shared a couple ideas about, taking a look at books and resources so that you prepare your words, you have your story aligned with their story. You've practiced in the mirror, spoken the conversation out loud. There's a lot of times when the conversation sounds different in our head, and then when we actually produce it, we find ourselves stumbling for words. So we do really encourage that practice and run through of the narrative. And then choosing a really calm and unhurried time to invite the conversation. Maybe even saying to your kiddo, hey, I want to talk about something important. Is now a good time? And get their buy-in to the conversation as well. Sometimes kids bring their questions to the table at unanticipated times, right? You might be trying to get out the door and get everybody to school. You might be doing pickup time, which is crazy, at the grocery store, someplace where it doesn't feel very private to have such an important conversation. So we always want to acknowledge the question and then kind of schedule a time to come back around to it. So we're giving it the value and importance that that question really carries behind it. So if you have to set it aside, you're saying, you know what? That's a really great question. Gosh, it feels a little busy right now, or it feels a little rushed. We're not in a very private space right now to have that conversation. Do you think we could come back to that at another time? And then setting when that time is. Why don't we wait till we get in the car and it's not so loud and I can really hear you? We don't have anything to do tomorrow morning when we wake up. Let's make some breakfast and let's talk about it. But we want to give the value and importance to that conversation, especially if they're bringing something to the table. We want to share calmly. So the goal here is using a lot of I statements. Sometimes we know a lot about the youth's story, sometimes we don't know as much. And those I statements can help us stay grounded in our experience and what we can actually bring to the table. So we're saying, answering questions by saying, here's what I understand, here's what I'm able to tell you, or here's what I know about what happened. And then using neutral and grounded language. I find that really just helps us to stay very respectful and open to any feelings or thoughts that the youth might be having about the situation. And then it also allows us to stay really respectful of the experience of the biological family and not putting anything onto that story that we don't know or bringing our own emotions about that story to the table, because we do want to keep that a really open space for our youth. And we're always acknowledging the complexity of the conversations that we're navigating. And you can say it, this is complicated. Let's talk through it together. Let me tell you what I know, or I'll explain a little bit, and then we'll keep talking and I'll keep answering your questions as best that I can. But right, we're just trying to have an open narrative and get some type of conversation going. Okay. So we also want to keep it honest and simple. I think one of the most important things that we can focus on is just focus on answering the question that was asked. Specifically, if a youth brings the question to you, if they open up and ask that question, just answer what it is that they asked. And so if they ask, gosh, what did my birth mother look like? We're just giving a description of the physical attributes if you know them. But we really want to be careful. Sometimes we see those questions, we see an open door, and we walk through it thinking, oh gosh, we're going to have a bigger conversation. Let me tell you what I know about things that are maybe not related to that conversation. But sometimes what they asked for was really all that they're able to accept at the moment. You can always answer the question and then ask, was there anything else? And then you're leaving them in a space to continue to control the conversation and come to you with questions. We want to be supportive to them always through all of our conversations, right? So we're emphasizing to them, like, you are not at fault in any of this. You are loved. Any feelings that you have are valid. And then also using language of reassurance. You didn't do anything wrong. It's okay to feel how you feel. That might be sad, angry, confused, and I'm here with you to talk through this. Um, I think a lot of our theme throughout our presentation is about being really emotionally prepared so that you can remain calm. You can always also share your feelings. I think that's very validating to our youth sometimes, normalizes their experience that sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes it feels unfair. We just want to make sure that we're bringing our emotions to the table that are validating and normalizing. We're not adding anything on top of that. Okay. And then we want to get their perspective on things and really make space for their voice. So we do that a lot, as Bevan had mentioned already, through open-ended questions. So our closed-ended questions allow youth to just answer yes or no, but don't really progress and contribute to furthering the conversation. And so you can be really mindful about trying to frame your questions through open-ended questions that elicit an actual response to that question, or at least we can try. So, what are you thinking? How do you feel about that? What else are you wondering about? That's just those opportunities to keep the conversation going. I know we always have a group of kids that tend to defer to, I don't know. And they say, I don't know to anything you ask. It's really hard to have a conversation because you don't know what step to take after somebody tells you, I don't know. I think first and foremost, when we're having conversations with our youth, we want to accept the boundary. So we're not trying to push through that. We want to accept that boundary. But I do think it's worth trying to clarify a little bit and see if we can take even a tiny baby step in a direction of getting a little bit more information. And so you can respond to a youth and say, I hear that you're saying you don't know. You don't know to that question. It's really important when we sit down and have these conversations that we're just trying to be as honest as we can. I want to do that for you, and I'd love if you could do that for me. So if you really don't know, then tell me I don't know. But if it's just that you don't want to talk about it, can you tell me I don't want to talk about it? And I'm going to respect your response either way. When I put on my therapist hat, having a difference between those two responses is incredibly helpful to me. I know it doesn't feel like a lot of progress, but they're very different responses. To have a kid tell you they don't know how they feel sometimes means that they're missing the language, the feelings language, the emotion language to tell you what that feels like to them. The thoughts, the logistics, the cognitive process, it's all jumbled. They're having trouble piecing that apart and finding the words to put all of that into a message that they can convey outside of their body. And that's skill building in a certain direction. To have a kiddo who tells you, I don't want to talk about it, that helps us understand, okay, so maybe they do have some recognition of how they feel and what they think about this, but instead, maybe we're focusing on skill building around trust and vulnerability and the safety to actually open up that language there. Those are two really different pathways. And so, although it's not a huge differentiation for them in their language, it's a baby step that just maybe allows us to understand a little bit better what's happening for them. And then remember too that it's always okay to say, I'm not sure. I don't really have all the answers to this. I'd love to think about it. Validating for them again, what a great question. That's a really important question. Thank you for asking that. I didn't know you were wondering about that. And then always, if we don't know the answers, remembering it's okay to say, I'm not sure. Let me find that out for you and come back to the conversation. We want to sit in the discomfort around these conversations. Not every conversation can resolve every problem in the world. And that's okay. I think that's really important to remember going into this. It is very important to give yourself the grace around that. right? What matters when we're sitting in these conversations is presence. I think there is a lot of testing that can happen, especially when we get into really emotionally charged situations. And so sometimes really the most important thing is remaining steady, remaining calm, remaining present, remaining calm in your responses and showing them however you feel is how you feel. Whatever you're saying is helping me understand how you feel, and we're going to get through it together. But that presence really, really does make a difference. All of that helps us keep the door open for future conversations, right? When something can go neutral to positive, it allows us to come back to it again another time. And we want to really use language that helps kids know that we're keeping the door open. I know this is really hard. We can keep talking about this as many times as you feel like you need to come back to it. We can come back to this anytime that you need. And then, of course, validating for them that this is really hard. This is really hard, but we're in it together. And a lot of this space around sitting in the discomfort also means checking in with yourself. And if you are working in a professional capacity, encouraging your parents that you're working with, check in with yourself throughout these conversations so that you can recognize emotionally what you need and then also identifying where are you getting that support from. When we sit in the discomfort, I think an important tip to keep in mind is kind of what I call remember the and. And it is a concept that there can be two truths that are present at the same time. So when our kids come to us with questions that kind of hit our heart a little bit, why couldn't I have stayed with my family? I wish I was with my birth parents. I wish I was with siblings. I wish I knew more about that side of the family. It just has an impact sometimes because we're working so hard to build such a great life for them. But we want to remember the and that our kids can wonder about that life and they can be, have wishful thoughts about how that life could have panned out for them and just have dreams and be curious about that and be very happy in your home and be very thankful for the opportunities and the love that they receive in your home. They are not mutually exclusive. And I think in these really hard conversations, it is a very easy kind of set of words to just keep ready. Remember the and. Those hard words, those vulnerable thoughts don't negate what they have in your home. Okay, so as you guys are navigating these conversations, we also want to really encourage to try and learn what factors are supporting a good conversation in your home. Some kids might really enjoy feeling like they have your full attention. They're happy to sit across from you at the table. They're happy to sit with you in the living room. They just feel like they've got this full undivided attention and they love that space for an important conversation. And then some kids feel like that's too intense. That face to face, that direct eye contact of sitting right across from each other, we want to avoid it at all costs. And so they do better when there's some type of mitigating activity, right? Maybe you're picking up things around the living room, kitchen, bedroom. And while you're doing that activity, that's a great time to have a conversation. Maybe they're helping with cooking things. So they've got a task on hand that's kind of simple. You can facilitate a conversation during that time. We also have a lot of success with conversations in the car, as long as the driver is in an emotional space where, right, maybe it's not a traffic jam or, something crazy happening on the road. But just kind of moving through the neighborhood and things. Driving creates a lot of easy distractions. As the driver, you're looking forward. You don't have that direct eye contact with the kiddo. The kiddo has the choice to look at you or look out the window as they're talking. So kind of, try and pick up some tips on what helps make a successful conversation for them there. And then you're also paying attention to understanding when your child needs answers and when your child just needs to be heard or needs validation. So again, if you're driving in the car and they say, "Oh, I wonder what my life would have been like if I had lived with my birth parents," you have each of these conversations is an opportunity to learn. Are you just validating for them? Yeah, that is something to wonder about. How would life have looked? We don't know. That's a curious thing. Or are they actually asking for an answer? Are there siblings out there that they're drawing parallels to, that they're trying to figure out really what that would have looked like for them? Every conversation that you have with your child, right, you're just refining what that looks like and finding out how they respond in the most positive way. And so overall, we've provided a pretty broad framework for things, right? We're focusing on preparing, being calm, being honest, inviting their voice and their perspective to things, sitting in the discomfort around some of these conversations. And then, also taking into consideration developmental approaches for things. We want to be really present and responsive to kids when they are asking us questions, but there is a lot of strength in planning and having some set responses that are kind of in your toolbox so you have something to bring to the table while you formulate the rest of your responses. So here we've just given a very simple response here of an example of how you might progress a conversation, have something immediately in your toolbox for this question of, why was I adopted? And that starts with the youngest age group. You're just saying you grew in another mommy's tummy. She was not able to take care of you. You came to our family. Then you go into addressing maybe there was something hard for your family that made it hard for them to take care of a baby or child. And so you came to our family, all the way up to teens and tweens, where you're starting to expand on that explanation. Maybe you're starting to identify more the type of concern that was happening in the home, if you can do that in a respectful way. And then because of the safety or consistent care, you came into my home. But we're using that whole kind of narrative of being planning, preparing, starting to think when they ask me these questions, what do I want to have? How am I starting to prepare that narrative so we can show up to the table, really ready to engage in those conversations. All right.
Okay. So we also want to help our children navigate questions from the outside world. Children need tools for how to respond to intrusive or awkward questions from other children or adults. Sometimes well-meaning relatives or friends at school may just ask awkward questions of your child, and it's important to maybe even rehearse with them how they want to respond in those situations, or after one of those situations happens, you can talk about, well, how would you like to respond next time, just to help your child have those tools. So you can teach simple, empowering messages that fit the child's needs, which could look like the following responses, but also could be just letting the child lead and deciding that they don't want to share. And they can use phrases such as, all families look different, or I don't want to talk about that. We just want to remind them that they don't have to fit into every school assignment or expectation, like those traditional family tree projects that we might remember from elementary school or baby photo timeline type projects. Just reminding your kiddo that their story is valid, even if it looks different from others. I've seen some adoptive families in the past get creative and think outside the box when it comes to those family tree projects, especially when you don't always have much information about the birth family. Sometimes families have made the birth family as the roots of the tree, and then the foster family or foster families as part of the trunk of the tree, and then the branches as the adoptive family. I've seen adoptive families for the baby photo projects. I've seen adoptive families borrow younger biological sibling photos. Sometimes our kids make it pretty far in foster care without a whole lot of photo documentation of themselves, especially if they've moved homes many times. So if you don't have those baby photos, I have seen families borrow. But then also with AI, that's certainly something you could try using with AI as well if those photos are not available. So a few closing thoughts. These conversations we will be talking to our kids about are not about having perfect answers. They're about creating a space where children feel safe to ask, to wonder, and to feel. Kids don't always have the right words to ask the things that they are curious about. We'll want to be mindful of not taking offense or being hurt by a question that has rough wording. At least we have the opportunity to guide the language moving forward through a gentle reframe or modeling new words with our kids. But in this moment, we have the opportunity to engage with our child and help them get some of their questions answered. So overall, we want to approach these conversations by staying open, opening that door, as we've said many times, being honest with your child in an age-appropriate manner, and being present, choosing the time where we don't feel hurried and the type of situation that your child feels most receptive to these conversations. We want to help children not only understand their story, but feel confident and supported in living it. So one additional tool that I wanted to share to foster communication is an engagement opportunity offered by DePelchin, where we discuss the impact of fostering on biological children living in the home and provide additional resources to prepare for those unique dynamics that having both foster and adoptive and biological children in the home can bring. After the training, DePelchin mails books to the adoptive family that has books for the relevant age of the biological children in the home. Again, just using these everyday examples with books to help normalize the experience of the children in the home. So this engagement opportunity is traditionally offered to families who are wishing to become a licensed home, but it's open to anyone with biological children in the home who are interested in trying to start these conversations as they start their journey with foster and adoption. So just one opportunity out there, and you can reach out to me or Jody if you have questions about that. All right, so Jody, did you want to wrap us up?
Sure. So we just wanted to make sure that we had our contact information here. We'll have a few minutes for questions and everything in a moment as well. But in case anybody was looking for a specific follow-up or had a question they wanted to direct either to myself or Bevan, here's our contact information, and then a website for our DePelchin Children's Center's main webpage in case there's any information that you were looking for there.